think obviously you know, just as we do risk assessments for laboratory-based activities, I think your artist you're working with is best placed to do the risk assessment for that because it's part of their normal practice, so they're used to doing that. So don't you worry. Don't build barriers. Try and find ways to overcome barriers. I mean, if you're putting ethics is too difficult. But I think in the faculty of medicine there's a too difficult box that they're all too willing to put stuff into, and therefore, you know, like getting kids in for work experience because no, we can't do it if they're under 16, but that's too late to get them engaged. You need to get them earlier. But you know, the university says no. End of discussion, and I think that too difficult box is a real problem.
I mean, certainly for the type of work that I do is obviously a very sensitive topic and can be very triggering. So there were multiple research ethical considerations, and that took ages to get approved, about 5 or 6 reiterations. For 6 months I was sending again different forms to the ethics committees and no, revise that, what about this ethical consideration, so it's that. But then actually I'm working with people who are, who are therapists, art therapists, who've got that experience and have worked in that field, so you do lend to them. You go to them and say, okay, how can we frame this? Is this an acceptable question? Or even working with schools, for example, they'll actually say, well, we know that these children have gone through bereavement, we probably think that this isn't adequate for them to attend, or they can do part of these workshops but not others, and I will always go to them with the sort of questions that I might pose to the children. So for example, tomorrow I'm going to talk about the Mexican Day of the Dead at school, and we're going to have about 150 children from year 7. And they're going to be creating commemorative hummingbirds. But I spoke to the head teacher and I said, okay, but we're combining that with a Holocaust memorialization. But rather than asking specific questions about if they've lost someone, it's going to be much broadly linked to historical context and, Second World War victims and commemorating them, rather than talking about losses in their own families, for example. So, I mean, I think it's just talking to the people that you work with. They know who they're working with, and they know who can deal with those sort of things as well. But you're right, there does have to be a rigorous sort of ethical process in place as well.
But it also sort of evolves as well, so the sort of data that you might not think you want, and then you run the project, I want data on this, and so we're sort of bringing in citizen science approaches where school children are contributing to the data that we'll use in our labs, and obviously the bone crayon's a starting point of conversation for that, and a bit of fun as well. But there's ethics with the school. We can't just go in and take kids' data on their height, which I didn't know. We can keep it within that activity on that day, but so it is definitely quite complex, the different layers, and for the different audiences that you're getting data from as well is like pretty tricky.
I think that one thing that we found as artists is that we quite often find ourselves in the middle of not necessarily we talked about you can go into a situation and these people don't talk to these people, but they'll talk to you, and you're thinking, I've just arrived here, but not that's quite an extreme thing. But what we found is, for example, when we did our year at Southampton University, the key thing was that we had really good facilitators. So we had Sarah Roberts, who was at the time was the curator at the Winchester Gallery, and Larry Lynch, who was the head of the faculty. And now he was great because he had all these communications across all the different heads, but not just the heads, all these researchers. And so we had loads and loads of meetings, and that's partly how we ended up at BRU, is that eventually you'll find an open door, but you need people to facilitate, because otherwise, as an artist, you can't expect an artist to know all of this stuff. And often, I think, if you're working with scientists, the scientists are already part of an institution of some sort for obvious reasons. And usually you'll find the facilitators are people who are open-minded to the connections, and then as you go around, you find the people who will let you in, if you like. It's not always. It's not a given that someone can actually, because of the way they work. For example, if you're doing research and you have to your job is to be really focused on one thing, you can't necessarily just start collaborating all over the place. So you have to find the right people, And it's not for every artist either, I would say. I know loads of people who wouldn't touch it.
So am I right in you saying, that actually as an artist you find yourself quite often being the broker of the solutions in these relationships then?
Well, they're not. It's funny, people, you know, it's that thing where people will say, oh, I used to like art, or whatever. It's almost like you become this, I don't know, we were talking earlier about what art kind of is, which is a very ephemeral thing, and it means all sorts of different things to lots of different people. But there is this sort of permeable kind of, I mean, it's almost like a cell, isn't it? It's like a semi-permeable membrane with ideas will flow in from all sorts of directions. And it's not necessarily as neutral a place as people think it is, but it can hold quite diverse ideas. And often, I think people we've found, I mean, I'm not a peacekeeper, for God's sake, but you know, but often we've found that you get opinions from all directions, almost as if you're a safe place to house them. How do you look at it? No. But it's true though, because you're there to sort of soak things up from lots of different directions. So it's kind of an interesting role to be in.